Welcome, this is Najma Minhas with Global Village Space, and I'm joined today by Mr. Hassan Aslam Shad. He's a lawfare expert to look on the FATF decision on Pakistan. Pakistan has not been formally taken out of the grey list, but has started a process starting with an on-site visit. Hassan, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Najma. It's my pleasure.
Hassan, tell me, what is the importance of FATF and why has it assumed such an important role in our lives?
Okay, so FATF is the abbreviation for the Financial Action Task Force. It's an intergovernmental institution. It comprises of some 37 countries. You have some regional organizations that are part of the FATF as well. These include the European Commission and the Gulf Cooperation Council. Then you have some institutions that are having an observer status on FATFs, which includes the World Bank and the IMF. Think of the FATF as a web of international rules and requirements that require countries to comply with two areas of the law. The first one is money laundering, and the other is financing of terrorism. So the FATF's purpose is to curb money laundering and financing of terrorism. And as part of its requirements, FATF gives a list to countries that it deems to be non-compliant with money laundering and financing of terrorism. Over the years,
how did it come into our lives into Pakistan?
Okay, so
we've been talking about FATF now for years, it seems.
Yeah. So FATF has become a household name in Pakistan, and let me just give some background about why FATF proceeded to move Pakistan to its much dreaded grey list. This happened in 2018 June, and the FATF, which comprises of the countries I mentioned just now and the international organizations, has requirements in relation to money laundering and financing of terrorism. And these requirements flow from some UN Security Council resolutions, which preceded FATF's requirements that were communicated to Pakistan. So FATF, after reviewing Pakistan over the years, decided that Pakistan was not complying with the money laundering and the financing of terrorism requirements, and it then proceeded to place Pakistan on the FATF grey list. So the idea behind placing Pakistan on the grey list was to require Pakistan to comply with the FATF list of requirements. These requirements related to having adequate domestic legislation to prosecute and to penalize individuals who indulge in money laundering and financing of terrorism. And this is the primary reason why Pakistan landed in the FATF grey list. However, there is also a political dimension to...
Before we come to the political dimension, I want to ask you, because this is not the first time that Pakistan's been on the FATF list. Between 2008 and 2010, we were on the blacklist, and then we got out of it. And then 2012 to 2014, we were once again on the grey list. So how come we're coming out and then going back onto this grey list or blacklist, as it might be? I mean, you'd have assumed that whatever the requirements of FATF were would have been fulfilled the first time we came out of the blacklist, or the first time that we came out of the last grey list.
Right. So, Najma, you see so you're right that Pakistan, this was not the first time that Pakistan landed on the FATF grey list. Pakistan had been placed on the grey list in 2012. It exited the grey list in 2015. Now, the circumstances that existed in 2012 did not exist in 2018. The world had moved on. The number of international requirements and obligations in relation to money laundering and financing of terrorism had increased because the countries that are a part of FATF had come up with newer requirements. So this is why Pakistan ought to have kept in mind or ought to have gauged the changes that were appearing on the international horizon, which Pakistan failed to do. Now, another important reason why Pakistan, in my view, landed in the FATF grey list in 2018 was Pakistan's failure to understand how international legal requirements work. And another reason why we landed in the list was because of geopolitical reasons. The US enjoys a certain clout in the Financial Action Task Force. It has a clout in the international organizations as well, as a result of which Pakistan landed in the grey list. And then because of its own follies, that is failure to understand the legal requirements and scrambling to to create domestic laws, Pakistan was late, as a result of which the world powers then did arm twisting of Pakistan to keep Pakistan on the grey list.
Can you highlight some of these follies on the legal front that you're referring to?
Yeah, so look, firstly, we have this concept called lawfare, which means using law as a weapon of war. The idea is to understand that today's battles are not fought on the war on the field, but they are fought in international institutions. Instead of a soldier, you have policymakers, you have diplomats who fight those battles for you in those international institutions. Countries are given a wish list of requirements they have to comply with, whether it's in relation to money laundering, whether it's in relation to financing terrorism. It could be an international treaty. So you need to have your eyes and ears on the ground. You need to understand what those requirements are, and you need to anticipate the challenges that may arise in the future. Pakistan has never had its proverbial eyes and ears on the ground. Pakistan has never institutionalized lawfare to understand the challenges that are thrown Pakistan's way.
So when you see these challenges, I mean, what is it that Pakistan has not done? I mean, you're saying that it hasn't understood. So what are these challenges that it hasn't actually understood? I mean, can you name a few?
Sure. So, firstly, we need to understand that in the post September 2001 world, the international terrain completely changed. We had UN Security Council resolutions which prescribed certain individuals and certain groups as terrorists and required all the countries in the world to put an end to financing of terrorism and to bring those individuals and groups to the book. Pakistan should have understood that this means that Pakistan will come in the eye of the storm sooner rather than later. And to avoid coming in the FATF grey list, Pakistan should have prepared domestic legislation, which it did not do over the years. Pakistan should have ensured that those individuals were not roaming around in the streets and holding processions. We know who those individuals are. It is a fact that we did not comply with international law. We did not even understand the requirements. Therefore, we were caught napping, and the fact that it has happened twice or thrice in Pakistan's case should be cause for alarm for us, because even though we will be exiting the grey list in October this year, it does not automatically mean that we will never end up on the grey list again. We very well might if we don't understand the requirements and we don't keep our house in order.
Okay, so you mentioned the second part of this, which is the geopolitical angle. Can you explicate on that a little bit as well?
Yeah, sure. You see, law does not apply in a vacuum. It applies along with politics. And although the international rule of law has a specific set of requirements, for example, in relation to money laundering and financing of terrorism, in the end, there are countries that apply those laws, or countries that have a certain clout, which is more than the clout that Pakistan enjoys today. So what happens as a result of that clout is that legal requirements are chosen in terms of what those legal requirements are, and then countries are picked. Whoever you want to make sure that they comply. You use that law for arm twisting purposes. All of that happens. So Pakistan, unfortunately, has been on the wrong side of the not only understanding or failing to understand the legal requirements, but we have also not been able to diplomatically make a case for ourselves as much as we should have over the years.
To who?
Come again?
Diplomatically not make our case to who?
So, Najma, you see,
Who are the players that are after us, according to you, under the geopolitical strategy?
So, look, I mean, everyone is a friend and everyone can be an enemy. It depends on what aspect of the law or any aspect of politics we are talking about. The US, as we know, has gotten very close to India in the last few years. So we have a clear nexus between US and India, not specifically in relation to Pakistan, but more to contain China's rise. Now, they are natural allies at this stage. Pakistan should have understood that to counter India's influence, to counter the US's clout, it should have perhaps warmed up even further to China. It should have gotten closer to Turkey, Iran, even countries like Russia, which can meet the energy demands of Pakistan. All these things should have been done without, and I'm not suggesting that
We were doing that, right? One of the major reasons that we've apparently received a threat from the United States was because of meetings we had with Putin, right? We were trying to become closer to him, and obviously at a wrong time.
Yeah, so we basically wilt under pressure. We, as a nation, don't have a spine. We don't take a stand. We allow me to say this. We are, very docile by nature. We succumb to pressure. We don't understand that this world respects countries that have a spine, who take a stand, who do what is good for themselves without worrying about the consequences. Unfortunately,
Okay,
the
so
U.S.
by that, you're referring to the fact that you feel that we should still stand with Russia and continue with warmer relations with China, despite
Absolutely.
despite what the United States obviously has a somewhat of an anti-China position and definitely an anti-Russia position at this moment in time.
Absolutely, Najma. Absolutely. We must get closer to
But on the
China.
other hand, you're mentioning that we should understand geopolitics and we should have actually made our laws according to FATF and other such institutions much more in line with geopolitical understanding. And yet you're saying let's go against the world order and embrace even more Russia and China.
So, firstly, we have to understand that the rules of the game will not change. The laws have been made by world powers. Those laws are going to stay. Just because we warm up to Russia or China does not mean that we stop complying with those laws. The US, China, Russia, all these countries are here to stay. They're not going to go away. We should do our homework in terms of complying with the law. But at the same time, we should also explore other avenues. If, for example, we are getting some benefits, some financial benefits, or some energy needs are being fulfilled by getting closer to Russia, we should do that. We should
Okay.
fight it out. If we have complied with the law, which is a big if, once we comply with the law, and if somebody is arm twisting us and forcing us to move away from Russia or China, then we should fight it out. We should diplomatically fight it out. We should legally fight it out. We should say, look, we have complied with the law. What more do you want us to do? But we will do what is best for Pakistan, for the
Okay,
country.
coming back to FATF again, um, we we've gone through a series of meetings, and the last two meetings held by FATF, I think each time we were almost high-fiving each other, saying we're about to come out, we're about to come out. But then we had the shock, especially in October 2021, when despite the fact that Pakistan had fulfilled 26 out of the 27 conditions, which is what we were told, FATF came back with another 7 conditions. So what do you think is happening? Why under Imran Khan's last almost 3.5 years, slightly above 3.5 years government, even though we were fulfilling conditions, we were still not taken out of FATF, although the meeting now sort of says that the current action plan was performed a lot faster than they had expected and more faster than what they had actually set out as well.
Yeah, so Najma, that raises some doubts and questions in one's mind. If all the heavy lifting was done in the Imran Khan era, then why is it that Pakistan is coming off the FATF grey list now? This seems to be a very dubious exercise to me because now, if we go back in recent history, we will see that in the last 1.5 years, Pakistan was stuck on those last couple of points. So FATF was asking Pakistan to do more to comply with those two requirements. Hamad Azhar and his team and all these ministries that we have in Pakistan were scrambling. There were many visits made by Pakistani delegations to different capitals in the world to meet or to show that Pakistan had complied with those requirements, but nothing seemed to be moving. So now suddenly, what magic has happened that Pakistan is seen to be the good boy and Pakistan is coming off the FATF grey
So
list?
I wanted to ask you that. I mean, do you think some kind of magic? I mean, some laws have been changed, certain actions we've taken, which has finally put the nail on the death nail on the FATF. I mean, do you think
Yes.
there's something
So
we've done in the last couple of months that has
yeah,
ensured?
so there is absolutely nothing that we could have done in the last couple of months because I haven't at least heard of anything done more than what Imran had done in his era. So it doesn't make much sense to me that this government's coming into power has led to Pakistan getting out of the grey list, other than the bigger question that comes to my mind that perhaps there was some sort of a deal. And allow me to say this because
Indeed.
it is a question. Well, I mean, if Imran goes out and then suddenly Pakistan comes out of FATF, and going back to recent history, we see that Pakistan had complied with almost every requirement. And given that this new government can't do anything in the last couple of months, then it leads one to the conclusion that perhaps Imran's ouster was, the understanding between the government and or the our powers that be and the United States, that Pakistan will come off the FATF grey list once Imran Khan's government ceases to exist.
So where does that leave us then? And given what you've just said on the last point, because officially we're about to get on-site visit, and after the success of that on-site visit, we will then be officially declared to be taken out of the grey list. Are you suggesting if Imran Khan, for example, is voted in, if we have an election between now and October, let's say, there's a chance that we may stay on the FATF list?
No, I think it's very unlikely that Pakistan is going to stay in the FATF grey list. I think Pakistan will now move out of the FATF grey list because FATF has made an announcement, although it is subject to the on-site visit that is going to happen in October. These international institutions don't make random statements. Their statements are very well thought out. They have collected all the evidence on the basis of which they have concluded that Pakistan has complied with the requirements. So therefore, I don't see Pakistan staying on the grey list post-October. However, as I said earlier, just because Pakistan will come off the FATF grey list this time around, hopefully in October, does not mean that Pakistan can never again get grey listed. It's a distinct possibility. So therefore, we need to be prepared. We need to understand.
What do we need to do going forward then? Let's say we come out in October officially. What do we need to do going forward to ensure that Pakistan does not suffer from lawfare? So not just FATF and us not following the FATF rules. Assuming we do follow the FATF rules, what is the lawfare element that we need to be wary of?
So, Najma, as you rightly said, FATF is one aspect of lawfare. There are many other areas of lawfare where we have been found lacking in the past. I have been writing articles for GVS as well as other international publications in which I have been talking about or arguing that Pakistan must institutionalize lawfare. Now, lawfare applies not only in the context of FATF, an international institution, it also applies in the context of Pakistan's international arbitrations, where we have bled millions of dollars over the years. We have examples of Recordec, we have the broadsheet case, and several others where we had to pay a huge penalty because we did not understand the legal requirements. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is taking advantage of the international legal system. So still now we have been on the defensive mode. We have been trying to put out the fires, like for example, in this case, trying to get out of the FATF grey list. But have we ever looked at the international system as an opportunity where we can use the international rules to our advantage? We can be sponsoring certain international treaties and conventions which could benefit us not only in the sense that we derive some direct benefit, but it could also it could improve our stature globally. We should be looking at that. Then we also need to look at how countries use lawfare to create facts on the ground. Like we have an example of the South China Sea, where the US and China have been embroiled in a dispute over the last many years, how China has used lawfare to its advantage. We talk about Iron Brotherhood with China, but we really haven't understood how our Iron Brother has been using lawfare to its advantage.
How has it actually? I mean, that's quite an interesting point. How has it used law?
So how do you use law? Okay, so what China has done is it has indulged in a psychological warfare. It has indulged in creating facts on the ground. It has used international rules to its advantage. All these things have been done by China, despite the fact that the US and its allies have won an arbitration against China in the South China Sea. So China, despite being left alone, literally left alone, and having no allies in the region, has still tried to use the law, the rules, the media to its advantage. We have not done that. If you look at Pakistan today, we are fighting an internal, if I may use the word lawfare, where we are pitched against one another. So until we resolve our own structural differences, we are not going to be able to respond to the challenges that come our way.
On that note, actually, I'd like to ask you that after the announcement made by FATF we saw tweets by not only different political parties, but also from the DGISPR, from the FBR, from Foreign Office, all, it seemed, taking claim that they were the ones responsible. I mean, how do you think as a state we need to view us getting out of FATF?
So, look, at the end of the day, let there be no doubt that Pakistan's coming out of the FATF grey list was the result of one man's vision and efforts, and that is Imran Khan. He was assisted by Hamad Azhar and by several other ministries who started basically giving input and were driven by Hamad Azhar, who became the focal point in relation to this entire exercise. Obviously, the military establishment also had a role to play in this, but it would be unfair for them or for anyone else to take credit here, especially the new government, which has been touting this as their victory on the international diplomatic front. It's not. The former Prime Minister Imran Khan's government should take all the credit for this, and let's not forget that the wish list that was given to Imran Khan's government to get out of the FATF grey list is something that has not been given to any other jurisdiction in the FATF's history. So this was a stellar accomplishment by his government.
Hassan, on that note, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. My pleasure.